fellow Americans, welcome across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Those of you who pay attention to golf, you'll remember the great division between the PGA and Live Golf. Live Golf decided it would do 54 holes of golf instead of 72 holes of golf like the PGA, and make the tournaments not last as long and the play would be fast. They're announcing for 2026 they're going to go to 72 holes as if it's a brand new concept. It's actually what every other golf tournament in the planet does. I guess they're going to call it Lexi, L-X-X-I-I. I guess they'll call it Lexi Golf or something like that. Sexy Lexi Golf. It's so stupid. Just get rid of Live. Go back to the PGA Tour, people. All right. I digress randomly. You know, just momentarily. I'm getting to the news, I promise. I just want to say that I have gotten to the age where if I leave my wallet in my back pocket, it's like, what have I done to my hip? No, it's just my wallet. How? Getting old sucks, people. Not that old, but still. All right. There are elections today across America. Let's focus on the elections. In New York, Mamdani is probably going to win. I thought it was very interesting that he has started getting real comfortable telling people, articulating his positions on things in ways perhaps he had not been in the past. Now it's just kind of a more matter of course thinking for Mamdani as he, stakes out positions on being a democratic socialist, you name it. He's way more comfortable knowing he's probably won the election. And by the way, the polls have gotten closer in New York. I just don't think Andrew Cuomo is going to be able to win. I don't think he's going to be able to win because he killed a lot of people's grandmothers. I had this argument with my agent the other day. He was on my front porch on Sunday, and I made that comment. That's not true. Ron DeSantis... Like, no. The data bears it out. And I pulled up the data to prove to him the per capita death rate of people over the age of 65 was far lower in Florida than it was in New York, in particular New York City. The per capita deaths of senior citizens during COVID in New York was far higher than in Florida. And I pulled out the data and I showed it. And Mike said, well, we didn't know at the time. It's like, no. Here's the thing. In all honesty, and it's not a partisan point here, Ron DeSantis and Andrew Cuomo had the exact same data at the exact same time. Ron DeSantis read the data and determined it was a bad idea to send senior citizens who had been infected with COVID back to nursing homes. And you will recall he ordered them to stay out of the nursing homes. If they went to the hospital, they had to stay in the hospital. They weren't allowed back to the nursing homes. And Andrew Cuomo sent them all back. And they spread COVID. And many of them died. And that did not happen in Florida. Andrew Cuomo and Ron DeSantis dealt with the same problem at the same time. And the per capita death rate of senior citizens was lower in Florida. The overall death rate in Florida was lower. And the Democrats then started to say, well, it's sunnier in Florida. And DeSantis let people go outside and they were on the beaches and COVID doesn't spread on the beaches. Except you Democrats were forcing people to stay inside. And remember, you had Gavin Newsom arresting people who went to the beach. My point here is not to relitigate COVID. My point here is to note that running a man in New York City for mayor who couldn't win the Democratic primary and then decided his best shot was bullying Curtis Lewa to get out of the race so that he could take his votes without ever having to make the case to those voters, many of whom lost their grandparents to Andrew Cuomo's policies, was not a good idea. Of course the commie was going to win. Like Megyn Kelly said a short time ago on this program, she resents being put in the position where she had to support Andrew Cuomo to stop a communist. And Mamdani is embracing being at least a democratic socialist. He's not saying that he's a communist, but he's saying he's a communist. in his wording as he danced around. And it was very notable that he went on Morning Joe. And he's now starting to say things like, well, let's just go with this from Morning Joe.
To go back to Joe's previous question, I've talked to Jewish New Yorkers who like your message of affordability. They think it's the right message, but then they go back and they say, well, he supports BDS. He won't condemn the language of globalize the intifada. He seemed to play both sides after October 7th in his initial statement. They're deeply worried that you have some animosity for Jewish people and for the state of Israel. How do you respond to that?
Look, I think critiques of the state of Israel are critiques of a government, as opposed to critiques of a people and of a faith. And my job is to represent every single New Yorker, and I will do so no matter their thoughts and opinions on Israel and Palestine, of which millions of New Yorkers have very strong views, and I'm one of them.
Would BDS be the policy of your administration as mayor?
I've said that I would support and have supported nonviolent movements to bring about compliance with international law. And where this mayor has violated and looked to violate that kind of law, I would bring us back into compliance.
So yes.
No, I'm talking about compliance.
Okay.
Right? And I've said that I support BDS because this is a movement that is looking for that kind of compliance. We haven't seen it.
So, yes, he supports the boycott, divest movement when it comes to Israel. He's now willing to say that on Election Day in New York after having denied it. And I just find that in and of itself very, very notable that he's now getting more comfortable with this. There's also this exchange.
Yeah, explain the difference. What is the difference between a Democrat, a democratic socialist, and a communist?
Well, I'm a democratic socialist who's also a Democrat.
Right.
And when I say I'm a democratic socialist, I explain it in the words of Dr. King from decades ago, who said that call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, there must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country.
Right.
And what I actually find is that when you're speaking to New Yorkers, they ask you less how you describe your politics and more whether there's room for them in that politics.
Right.
And New Yorkers are asking me, does your politics have room for my struggle to afford my rent, my childcare, my groceries? And frankly, President Trump ran an entire campaign focusing on the cost of living, focusing on the promise of cheaper groceries. And his inability to do so is now making him increasingly desperate to try and stop the campaign that will actually deliver on the same diagnosis that he shared.
Except it won't. But notice he's now embracing democratic socialism, which is communism. The democratic socialist government of Germany was the communist East Germans. There's got to be a better distribution of wealth for all God's children in this country. That's communism. But communism still has a battle. You know, they're willing to embrace democratic socialism now. In a few years, they will totally be willing to embrace the label communism. And he's going to get elected in New York City. The question is New Jersey. The polling in New Jersey and the election day turnout thus far in New Jersey is far closer than a whole lot of people imagined. And the Democrat in New Jersey and the Democrat in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, they were picked to not rock the boat, to be very milquetoast, bland candidates. And they've been terrible on the campaign trail. And now you got a Republican who could actually win in New Jersey. Now, the odds are with the Democrats, but it's possible. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger is going to win. Now, part of the reason she's going to win is, keep in mind, the government's been shut down now since October 1st. So federal employees who lean Democrat in Northern Virginia, they've had a lot of time to go canvass for her. They've had a lot of time on their hands to knock on doors. They've had a lot of time. Part of me does wonder if the Democrats have decided to keep the government down the way they have so that they can use this for shutdown politics spin. Because the midterms actually aren't going to be great for the Democrats. And if they've gotten federal workers off the job now for how many days, those federal workers have been able to canvass and early vote and knock on doors and drive up turnout. And Democrats tomorrow can say, see, look at the turnout, look at the turnout. Well, yes, because these people have had lots of time on their hands. But what's notable is that Winsome Sears has actually closed stronger. She's not a good candidate. I like Winsome Sears. You're not hearing me insult Winsome Sears. I'm just saying she's not a good candidate. For those of you who don't understand why Winsome Sears is not a good candidate, let me explain things to you. Winsome Sears has talked about campaigning in the Norfolk area. That's Norfolk, Virginia. The people who live in that area call it the Tidewater area, not the Norfolk area. Why? Because there's Norfolk, there's Virginia Beach, there's Portsmouth, there's Chesapeake, there's Newport News. That whole area is called the Tidewater area. When you say you're in the Norfolk area, not the Tidewater area, you alienate the people in those other communities. I know this because my sister and her husband lived there for years because he was in the Navy. In the same way, Southwest Virginia is called Southwest Virginia. It's not called the Southwest, and Winsome Sears referred to it as the Southwest. The Southwest is Arizona and New Mexico. Southwest Virginia is Southwest Virginia. And Winsome Sears knows these things, but she just hasn't been good on the campaign trail. She's a great person. She's been a fantastic lieutenant governor. She's just not a good campaigner for governor in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger, on the other hand, has been a terrible campaigner for governor, and she just benefits from a Democratic environment. It's been wild to see just how terrible Abigail Spanberger has been. She can't answer questions. She's tried to avoid the press to avoid answering questions. She can't get the trans question right. Winsome Sears made the trans issue a big issue, but here's the problem for the GOP. I need to tell you this. And Philip, you can cut the small segment out of this monologue here at the end if you want to. Republican candidates have to be careful when they talk about the transgender issue. And too many Republicans are doing it the wrong way. What I mean by that is very simple. The transgender issue for Republicans should be a signal to voters that Democrats don't care about you and your issues. They care about fringe issues. When you make the transgender issue just about transgenderism, well, you've already got those voters. You already got the people as a Republican who oppose boys and girls bathrooms. So if you talk about boys and girls bathrooms and girls and boys bathrooms as just that issue alone, you're not gaining voters. If you talk about those issues in a way that signals to voters, the Democrats, they don't care about you at all, but I, a Republican, care about you and your issues, you're going to win. You have to be careful. There's a fine distinction there. When Donald Trump did his ad, Kamala Harris cares about they, them, Donald Trump cares about you, it made the trans point, but it used the transgender point to make the larger point that Kamala Harris only cares about the weirdo freaks at the far left of the Democratic Party, and Donald Trump cares about you and all your issues. And that ad was powerful for him. Republicans and Democrats alike credit that ad for helping Donald Trump win the election. So if you're just using the issue of transgenderism to target transgenderism, you've already got those voters on the right if you're opposed to it. How you use that issue to expand the coalition matters, and you use that issue to signal to voters that the Democrats are so captured by a woke progressive mob that they can't focus on the issues that matter to the working class and the middle class. If you do it that way, you're going to win.